Thanks, Amanda. And one of the most controversial Federal Reserve Chairman votes ever, Ben Bernanke, was reconfirmed by the U.S. Senate. President Obama says that Bernanke has provided wisdom and steady leadership during the economic crisis. Other backers are supporting his creative use of the system to prevent an even worse catastrophe. Opponents, however, blame him for not spotting the crisis in advance. Joe Krier is president of Krier Wealth Management, here to weigh in and discuss what this means to you, and also to talk a little bit about that small business tax credit the president will talk about in greater detail today. $5,000 tax credit to every business that hires a new worker. What are critics saying about that plan?
Yeah, well, and backing up a little bit, it kind of represents a shift away from trying to put the past behind us, and Congress is trying to distance themselves from all the problems, and now the big shift is towards jobs. So, you know, the credit is there. The idea is to get small businessmen like myself to hire people, but the critics are saying, hey, if we don't have increased revenues coming in the door, we're not going to hire someone just for a tax credit. And
even though it's a $5,000 tax credit, some say it's not enough.
One of my employees yesterday said, why don't you fire all of us and hire us back next month? And I said, that could be an interesting idea, but I can't promise everyone will come back. No, just kidding.
All right, let's talk about Ben Bernanke. Certainly he's been at the center of this firestorm. He's the man in charge. Is a lot of blame being pushed on him unnecessarily, unfairly, maybe?
I think so, you know, and it's easy to do that because the Federal Reserve is not an elected position. It's an appointed position by the president that's approved by Congress. So if you're a senator who's up for re-election next year, let's say, it's a lot easier to push all the blame on him and distance yourself from it. But the truth is, the Fed didn't create the problem. It was all of us and the banks and Congress. You know, we all share in part of what's going on. You can't point at one guy and do this.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the highlights of Bernanke. He is a scholar of the Great Depression, which a lot of people say was very valuable during this day.
Absolutely.
He oversaw the financial crisis. He participated in the design of the TARP and also participated in the stimulus program, which, you know, things went wrong with some of those things.
Yeah, hey, this was a situation that we had never seen before in history. You know, there was some similarities to the Great Depression, and his experience came in handy there, but these programs were massive experiments. You could almost say that everybody had their fingers crossed saying, hey, let's hope that this stabilizes the system. It's achieved that, but we're not quite out of the woods yet.
And he's got some other challenges he's got to face, among them to try to bring back employment for people. Inflation, that is always kind of lurking out there, isn't it?
Sure, those are the two key things that the Fed is charged with, is maintain full employment, control inflation. For him, the way to control inflation is to, I've got the word undo up there, they've got to undo TARP and the stimulus package before the economy heats up too much, because there's a lot of money floating out there, and the key is that the Feds now have to start pulling that money out of the economy before it generates runaway inflation.
Do you feel like if it had not been for Bernanke and some of these programs that we would be in a depression right now as opposed to a recession?
I do. I think it's a lot worse, and to play, you know, Monday morning quarterback with this, going back a year and a half ago, this was a moving target, and the situation was getting worse by the day. If you remember, there was big banks that were fine on Monday and bankrupt on Friday. That's a situation for disaster, especially when you're talking about some of the biggest banks in the country. So they had to act fast, they had to act dramatically, and they did that, and I think it did save us from a lot worse situations.
So Bernanke's confirmation, how and when will this affect our viewers? Will it at all?
I think it will. I mean, having the steady hand, if he hadn't been confirmed, I think that Wall Street would have panicked, and we all would have seen it in our savings and retirement accounts. And, you know, you need that continuity sometimes. You can't blame the firemen for knocking down the front door when they saved your house by putting the fire out. And that's kind of the position he's in. He's a steady hand, and, you know, there is continuity, even going back to the Bush administration. You know, President Bush nominated him. Barack Obama re-nominated him, and we've got this continuity, and a pretty calm person who, compared to Alan Greenspan, is a lot easier to read and communicate with, and that's what we need these days.
Boy, a lot of us are having trouble sleeping at night. Imagine Bernanke, what's going on in his brain when he lays down.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Joe. Joe Krier is president of Krier Wealth Management.